All right. Well, one of the things that wasn't necessarily jarring, but it was definitely eye-opening when I moved from Pittsburgh Steelers, Arizona Cardinals. It was, the same sport, the same league, but like we talked about, I think earlier, was like what worked for the Steelers wasn't going to work for the Cardinals. So going from, the Niners to the Vikings to now the Falcons, like what has been, what is that process for you when it's like, it's not just rinse and repeat. Like you're not doing the same things that you did with the Niners, that you did with the Vikings, that you do with the Falcons. It's like you have to learn the fan base and learn that type of content and what you're trying to do. So, just maybe take me through that process for you and how it kind of worked out.
Yeah, I mean, first, we do it differently in Atlanta than we did in Minnesota than we did in San Francisco. We also have very different strengths and weaknesses as a team. Um, and you want to be able to set those teams kind of up for success, right? Like there's certain things that are important to each organization. So it's kind of understanding that initially. With Atlanta, it's multiple teams within the same organization too, which that's very different. You know, I can say like one thing that helped at every organization, like I've worked for three very good organizations with great leadership and great ownership with Jed York and Mark Wilf and Arthur Blank. Um, it really is top down. And so ultimately being able to have the resources to be successful and be supportive, when I went from Minnesota to Atlanta, I was going from one really good organization to another really good organization. That being said, it's just kind of navigating the nuances is within it from like kind of a brand voice perspective. Like that takes a little bit of time. And I'm not from Atlanta. I grew up in Sacramento. I'm from the West Coast, but I was also had never lived outside of California before I moved to Minnesota. So I had to buy some jackets first. But also just kind of learn about the city. Like one of the things that I've done in both places is just listen to a lot of sports talk radio when I get in because like I really just want to understand the culture. And a lot of that, good and bad, kind of bleeds through sports talk radio, but those are really good things to understand. So you also want to listen to your flagship and listen to the folks who are carrying Falcons games and United games and things like that, just to be able to see what they're saying about the team. That's really important. But then also too, rely on the folks who have been there for a lot longer than you have. Our VP of marketing for the Falcons grew up here and grew up rooting for the team. Like he's a great resource in terms of what's going to work for our fan base. Our creative director, Larry, has been, with the organization or in the city of Atlanta for a long time too, and he understands Atlanta culture. And so to be able to, I've been here a year and a half, right? Like it's I'm still kind of learning. And some of these things that we go through together in different campaigns and seeing how fans respond and kind of the Sundays campaign that we've grown and kind of started to like take that to like different levels. Now in 2 years, like you just kind of learn by doing. And it takes a while. And anybody who says like, oh, just, kind of read a book on like the history of the team, like sure, I guess. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the things, if you're a sports fan, you just kind of like can know a little bit about the team, but it's the culture and the community that's the most important, and that you're not going to learn in a day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that was I talked to Noah Lau, who's content producer with the Brooklyn Nets, and I was a
Hmm.
fan of his when he worked with the Phoenix Suns. And again, like going from, he's from Arizona, moving to, Brooklyn across the country, same league, different teams, completely different fan bases. And one of the things he said was like, I got into biking and I just got out into the city and like
Hmm.
really saw like what the city was all about and how things are done in Brooklyn that are different than anywhere else. And so it's like that's one of the main things that like me being from Pittsburgh, that's an advantage I have over anyone
Yeah.
who's not, is because I grew up, wearing black and gold. I grew up and know the history of the team, but know it from a fan instead of, like you said, from a history book. So it's always interesting to hear. It's like I don't know that there's one proper way to do anything really in this industry. But that was really, aside from the leadership thing, that was such a big, eye-opening experience, was like something, I did with the Steelers, we'd do with the Cardinals, and it would get way less interaction because it just wasn't, that's not the fan base. Like, yes, it's the
Mhm.
same sport, it's the same league, but it's like the fan bases are so different. And it's like, it's just getting into that and understanding it is so, so crazy.
It is fun though. You get to kind of reinvent yourself a bit. It's kind of like actors taking on new roles, right? And it's like you talk to people who are kind of in that field, and like they generally get kind of a rush out of, kind of becoming someone else, right? Like it is really fun. And I think there are some parallels there too to like kind of embracing kind of a different fan base and a different community, different culture, different city, different location. Like I've worked on the West Coast, in the north in Minnesota, and now in the south. So I've kind of gone very like each city very different culturally. But that part of it is really fun. And it's really like one of the things that I like the best is just being able to actually meet the fans at different events. It's kind of also why I'm kind of so passionate about some of the international expansion and growth and things like that that I did in Minnesota, as well as now here in Atlanta. We were able to successfully bid on marketing rights in Germany, but going out there and then like talking to some of the German fans, and some of them came out here, and I met up with some of them, and I think it's a really good opportunity to kind of my expression is like surveys of one. So you kind of go out and hey, I can get a whole bunch of data from 100 people that take a survey, and okay, great, that gives me like a little bit of a smattering. Or I can go really, really in depth with one person, and I can ask them every question that I want to know and follow up questions and really dig in and see like how some of the things are kind of resonating with our fan base. And so whether that's folks locally, folks internationally, I just think like take advantage of those like surveys of one, so to speak, when those opportunities arise.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Well, so transitioning a little bit to kind of the content side, and things that jump out to me, I remember with the Vikings, like a claymation Viking series that you guys did that was so amazing, and we were jealous of every time you posted it. The Minnesota Miracle being a part of that, like this stuff with the Falcons this year, where it's like, the shots from the ceiling,
Mhm.
the mascot jumping down on bungee cords, ludicrous with his 360 can, like one of those, or something that I didn't mention. Just like take me through kind of the thought process when you're, I guess, like pushing the boundaries of what everyone else is doing, because everyone's looking for inspiration. Everyone's looking at all of the other teams in their league, plus, all the NBA teams, all the MLB teams, all the NHL, like, Real Madrid, Manchester United. Everybody's looking for that inspiration, but it's like there are very few teams who are that trailblazer, who are ahead of the curve when it comes to this stuff. And I just always am curious of, like, the Vikings were one, the Carolina Panthers were another, and it was like every time, and now the Falcons, like every time you guys post something, it was like, man, like why didn't we think of that? And so it's like I don't know if there's some special formula that you guys have. Please don't share it on this, but like how how do you manage to stay ahead of the game rather than kind of like looking to others and emulating, basically?
Yeah, well, first, I appreciate you saying that. It's very nice. I think that, and I guess I'll use the kind of the claymation kind of example. Um, and this is when Vine came out. And so there was just a lot of kind of seeing what every other team was kind of doing. And it would be 6 seconds, team takes the field, 6 seconds, huddle breakdown, 6 seconds of like a receiver catching a pass on the sideline. And it's just like you look at what everybody else was doing on the platform. And the reason that I loved that platform was it was literally like magic. And so there were people, and you look at like TikTok now and kind of like some of the stuff that Zach King is doing, right? Like we looked and I was like, who's the best? I literally Googled. I was like, best Vine artist in the Bay Area. Cause I was like, who's doing this the best, right? And so I found somebody, his name's Ian Padgham. We're still friends all these years later. And for some reason, he continued to work with me in Minnesota. But we kind of experimented with some stop motion stuff and kind of one playoff run with kind of a different creator that was kind of through a company. So we posted it, and I remember it might have been Darren Ravel responded, and he said, "Oh, this is amazing! Haha, the 40 Viners," or somebody like maybe he posted it in a comment back from a fan. Anyways, 40 Viners came out, and I was like, "Oh my God, like this is gold." I was like, "We literally have to do something with this." And so I Googled, best fine artists in the Bay Area, and I found Ian. And so we drove up to San Francisco in the 49ers wrapped vehicle. Me and Eric Stark was actually with me, and we went and we talked to Ian. He's like, "Hey, I'm an artist, and I don't know like a ton about football, but this sounds interesting." Because I'm like, I want to take what you're doing and like, what if we were the first sports team to do this on Vine? And he's like, "Okay, well that'd be kind of cool. Like, love it, love what you're pitching." And it's like, okay, cool idea. We need to work with this guy. We know we have to work with this guy. We all think we're creative, and then you meet Ian, and you're like, dude, he is creative. And I remember we had some folks from Levi's that were on site at the 49ers offices. And my boss, and I did not know that they were there at the time, but my boss calls me, and I was kind of in a different building. And he's like, "Oh, hey, can you come down here? I want you to kind of take us through this Vine idea." I was like, "Okay." And so I hung up and I kind of like ran down there, and he's like, "Go quick." So I come in and I open the door. I'm like a little bit out of breath because like some of the buildings are spread out there. And so I think he's like the head of marketing for Levi's. And he's like, "Oh, hey Scott, pitch your like Vine idea." And I was like, "Dude, like give me some sort of heads up." And so I'm like, "Okay, here's the thing. We're gonna make like magic on Vine in like 6 seconds." And he's like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" I was like, "I don't know. I'm like selling a dream. I'm like overwhelmed." But anyways, he liked kind of, ultimately when I could get my thoughts together, kind of liked what I said, and ultimately like went up there and had a few meetings and brought in Ian for one of the pitches. And then ultimately we kind of came up with this concept of 40 Viners presented by Levi's. And I remember the first post that we did was he did a series of wearing the Levi's like 49ers jacket and the helmet, and he was jumping uh, various places along the field, and it looked like he was just kind of flying across the field. So that was our first post. And I think like Yahoo Sports wrote like an article, and it was like, whoever's running the 49ers Vine account is in all caps like amazing. And I was like, dude, like this is what happens when you just like kind of see something that's like untouched. Like if everybody's going like this way, and you're the first like group organization that goes like kind of another way and like kind of finds this untapped like vertical, like most of the time like we're doing is like we're talking about access and like, okay, can we get like inside the locker room, and like can we put a mic on the head coach, and like dude, all these things. And like there's varying degrees, like teams have different levels of access. All those things that like you kind of mentioned, from claymation vines or like the roof shots or the mascot or ludicrous, like here in Atlanta, like none of those had anything to do with access. Like we just created like stuff that was amazing, right? Like by like looking at it from like a different point of view. And like all the credit on the roof shot, like our senior director of production, his name's Austin Hiddle. I'll give him a little crap because he was written about in the Wall Street Journal, for his roof shots, and he's a big deal. But anyways, one, it's terrifying to go up there and shoot from where he shoots. Absolutely terrifying. And so to be able to go up to the ledge of the stadium above the halo board there, and to be able to kind of shoot that from that perspective, and then that's not it, but to be able to then motion track everything, add sound, and kind of that immersive audio experience that kind of like almost makes it feel like video game, or it doesn't feel real almost. Like that changed. That kind of like so many different teams went up there and, hey, can we do this in our stadium? We have a dome. Like, where are catwalks? Like, how high can we get? And that was like really cool to see like the movement that like that started. That had nothing to do with me, by the way. But there are just these different ways. Like, don't get upset with access or the fact that like one team can do something else that you can't. Like, I don't know, what's your competitive advantage? Like, what can you do that's just like great storytelling or like making art or, like those types of things that can kind of just speak to a different community. Like the first Freddy Falcon stunt video has like 10 million views on like YouTube Shorts. Like it's just like it's insane. And I'm like, why did this like blow up this much? And specifically on this platform versus the other platform, like, look, like our fans care about more than just sports. Like, how do you appeal to like even a wider audience that just loves it for the content that it is, and it really like kind of transcends the logo on the uniform? Um, I think that that's what's really cool, and what always kind of excites me about kind of finding like the what's next.
Yeah. No, it's so cool to hear. Like eh, I've always preached like any limitation is just an opportunity to be creative. Like you're never gonna like every team is not structured the same. Like you said, from the top down, no matter what it is, like buy-in is different, the support is different, the staffing's different, like just the goals of the organizations are different. So it's like, just like you said, what sets you apart from everybody else and lean into that. And the other thing is being brave enough to not do what the other, 31 teams or 29 teams are doing. It's like that's one thing I think, I've gotten stuck in the past and other places I've been and other places I've heard from is like you get stuck in the, well, we did this and it worked, so let's stick with it. Let's keep doing it because it's comfortable. We know what we're expecting. Like it's nothing you have to pitch and go through the process and
Hmm.
think and brainstorm. It's just like we don't have enough time, this works, let's do that. So then it's like it gets into the, one having the courage to be able to step outside the box and go with it. And, for good or for bad, because, for every, 40 Viners video that went out that was a success, there's 100 other things that get posted that weren't. And, there's so many things that I've worked on in the past where it's like, they were huge and amazing, and I'm so proud of them. And the others that weren't as huge and amazing, it doesn't make me any less proud. It's just they didn't work as well as you'd hoped, or they
Hmm.
didn't hit that same chord. But it's just looking back, it's definitely interesting of
Yeah.
the attributes and the things that you need to be able to be creative. It's not just
Hmm.
thinking of the great idea. It's putting a plan in place. It's having the courage to step out of the box. It's all these different things that you really don't think of.
Yeah, and I think to your point about just kind of like what you see from other teams, like, and I mean this respectfully, like I try not to like only look at like sports teams. Um, I think one of the places that I've always kind of gotten like the biggest inspiration is like literally from other creators. Um, we worked some of the Freddy stunts and the Ludacris video. That was a guy named AJ Sistrom who came out here, was part of a video crew we worked with week one to do kind of the Sundays kind of video edit. And so we're like, hey, Freddy's jumping from the roof. And so many teams have kind of tried to do this. And I was like, how do we do? Can we do this with like a 360 cam? Can we like oh yeah, actually he does like 360 video for Puma and Cobra. And so I was like, dude, this would be and so working through kind of the logistics with him, and then I'm like down in the mascot locker room, and we're like trying to figure out like equipment and like hooking it up to Freddie, and like, okay, let's like hope this goes well. We've never totally done this before. And then I heard when that kind of like blew up, some of the other mascots were like texting Freddie, saying how they're like, dude, we've done these stunts for a while, but like this one like took off. And it's just, okay, yeah, well, we worked with somebody who's really, really good at doing that specifically, and that makes you better. And so just being able to utilize like those resources, working with Ian, we were actually out at the Shorty Awards. I think it was the last year that they had best use of Vine as a category. And so we just joked around. We were like, well, we closed it out. Okay. But it was just kind of fun just to meet all of his creator friends and people that he had worked with or heard of or seen online. And that's how we were introduced to a guy named Evan Garber, who at the time He was doing a bunch of drawings on Snapchat, but he was only using his finger. And so he would take a photo and then it'd be like, okay, here's this cool photo of Zach. Okay, well now he's an astronaut and he's in outer space and and so we called it Skull Scribbles. And ultimately like sold that campaign. And so then we started doing that on Snapchat, kind of expanded it to Instagram. And funny how things turn out. Delta was a partner for the Vikings on that series, kind of around the time that I left. And so Delta's also a partner in Atlanta. And so Atlanta actually told our branded digital partnerships folks who are kind of on my team and with AMBSC, they were like, hey, well, we do this deal with the Vikings. Like, do you think we could do this for Atlanta United? So he's like, hey, Scott, you did this in Minnesota, right? I'm like, dude, this is awesome. I'm so glad that Delta's in. And I was like, hey, Evan, can we kind of like reheat this? And then how do we kind of take that same concept and transition it for Atlanta United? But like all those were just like, creators and people who are wildly more talented than I am. And just being able to kind of try new things and be a little bit different and kind of take some risks. And I don't know, that's fun. Like, I still really like, you know, back to what we were talking about earlier, like kind of doing the work. I still really like doing the work. So it's like when I had to go up in the rafters with Freddie, as he was dressed with Santa Claus and like stand up there and like I'm terrified of heights, by the way. So this was not hands were sweating and it's like the real deal up there in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But like to be able to do that and then turn around with our video production crew at MBS and to be able to kind of edit that and turn that around and then be able to kind of do that a little bit more self-sufficiently, was great. But we're always on the big ones. I think I'm going to call AJ and make sure he gets out there so we can kind of like, okay, now what do we do? We're already talking about like, how do we take that to like the next level next year? What does like 2.0 look like,